but also, again, knowing that I have the tools to be able to whip that back into shape pretty quickly and to make sure nothing's going to fall between the cracks. So, that's been just a really valuable tool set for that, really. Like, I think having good structures when you are at work helps you to not be at work and to not feel too bad about that. And I think that we've all probably been on those holidays at one time or another where you spend half the holiday worried about the things that you should be doing at work. And I think, if I'm really on top of my productivity ninja game, I just don't think about work at all when I'm not there.
Welcome to the Manifested Wellbeing podcast. I'm Leandro, your host. Today's guest is Graham Allcott, productivity ninja and founder of Think Productive, offering practical support to organizations that want to increase their productivity. Graham, thank you very much for being here today.
Good to be here. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Great. Are you based in Bristol, UK?
No, Brighton.
Brighton.
Yeah, so down on the south coast. I was born in the Midlands, then I lived in London, and now I've gone all the way down to the south, and now I'm in Brighton.
Oh, it's Midlands. How is life back there when you're young? How was your childhood?
Yeah, I mean, it was a fairly average childhood in many ways. Two very loving parents with not much money, a couple of sisters, and I felt quite blessed that we lived in a small town, which meant you could sort of go out into the fields till 4 o'clock in the morning, and so somehow you felt safe and your parents felt you were safe enough. So it was a good time.
That's great. And what made you move to South West England?
Well, I moved to London through work. I used to run a charity, a small national charity. So we were involved in a lot of work with government. And as part of that, you just had to be near Westminster, really, and near all the main kind of civil service hubs and all that stuff. So I moved from Birmingham, where I lived at the time, down to London for that job. Never really had a massive intention to be in London, but the job took me there. And I loved London, and then I got tired of it. And I think, I was there for sort of 7 or 8 years. And I think that's probably a good stretch to live in a very busy, fast-paced city like London. And I love going back. So Brighton is it's like about an hour on the train. So you can go to gigs late in the evening and always get a train home. London feels like it's on your doorstep in Brighton. But we have the sea, and we have a slightly more relaxed pace of life, which I really enjoy. Okay.
And what is a productivity ninja like, and how did you become one?
How did I become one? Yeah. So many years ago, when I was running that charity, I would go into the office on a Saturday morning just to try and get the email inbox back down to something respectable. And I was working many, many hours a week, working through the evenings, writing bids and funding applications and all this sort of stuff. And, replying to policy briefings at 3 minutes before they were due and all this kind of thing. And what I realized during that job was I was pretty good at just getting stuff done, but also my main strength was having ideas and being the strategic thinker. And in that role, I had a really great team of people around me. So people who, if I had ideas sat at my desk, they would scurry around and make it all happen. And often, what happens with leadership is you have the ideas, lots of other people do the work, and you take the credit, and then you call it leadership, and then it feels like it's highfalutin and important. But I realized when I left that job and I went freelance, and I was just a freelancer on my own with no team, I realized that I wasn't so good at the completer finisher side of work. So just seeing things right through to their completion point and being really organized, having really good systems. That was not me. It kind of never was. And because I kind of went straight into this leadership role, I didn't really do the whole middle management bit, which I think is where a lot of people learn that stuff, or I thought was where a lot of people learn that stuff. Yep. And so I then started falling into, just learning about productivity, the psychology of productivity, what produces procrastination, all of these kind of things, read lots of books, was reading and, on the internet, looking at blogs and just everything I could get my hands on really around productivity. It just became a bit of an obsession to actually kind of work on me and make me more productive. And once I'd done that, I just fell into teaching it. So it suddenly became apparent that everybody else needed this stuff too. And I thought I was the last one that needed to learn it, and everyone else had it figured out. And then it suddenly just felt like, oh no, there's a whole bunch of people here who just really need my help now that I've figured it out. So I kind of fell into running workshops. This was maybe 11 years ago now or something like that. And then just over 10 years ago, we set up Think Productive, which is my company. So we work with some of the biggest and brightest and most interesting companies in the world. And we're really privileged to go in and work with the likes of eBay. We've been into Google. We work with Boots. We work with Volkswagen and Audi, and a whole bunch of different organizations in different sectors. Charities like Cancer Research UK as well, government organizations. And what we do is we go in and run workshops. So we help people to do things like getting their inbox back to zero. We do a whole bunch of stuff around my book, How to Be a Productivity Ninja. So some short sessions around learning the characteristics of the Productivity Ninja, kind of firing people up around productivity and kind of keynote kind of stuff. And then really in-depth stuff that takes a whole day, where really by the end of the day, we get all the stuff that people are working on into some kind of order and a system that we call the second brain. So having a place to be able to hold and manage all of those different commitments and thoughts and expectations that we have in our jobs, and have a place to be able to put that and be able to manage it and control it, and having a sense of control and perspective around your work, and being able to really see the wood from the trees and make really good decisions with all the data is something that is it's a real luxury for a lot of people in their work. But actually the habits that we teach really help people to get to that place on a very regular basis and kind of be their own project manager really. And by doing that, you kind of give people a much greater sense of kind of stress-free momentum in their work. So rather than people feeling stuck and slightly procrastinating and slightly uncertain about what they're doing, it's like, yeah, this is great, I know what I'm doing. And you get that kind of really addictive momentum around it. And the more you experience that momentum, the more you want more of it as well.
It's very interesting. And how much would you think that uncertainty on what you have to do or on the expectations for what you're doing contribute to people procrastinate, on your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really the root of a lot of procrastination is just, I think people don't recognize often, or they find it difficult to recognize the value of clear thinking. And, I often describe productivity when I'm asked the question, what is productivity? Often my slightly flippant answer is it's making space for what matters. And I think it's very difficult to make space for the stuff that matters when you're, in a job, in an open plan office with lots of people running around, wanting a bit of your time, instant messages going off, emails coming in, all that stuff. It's really difficult to step away from all that and just go, okay, what really counts here? What's the stuff that's really going to make a difference? And so I think, there's always this underlying subconscious uncertainty around, is the thing I'm doing right now really the thing that I need to be doing? Or is there something bigger that I'm leaving on the to-do list? And often, when I'm working with people, they'll often describe this feeling of there's the big, chunky, heavy item on the to-do list that just moves from day to day to week. And it's like always that same thing. And I think, often what we do is just give people those tools to be able to take that step back, to be able to get a much greater sense of where they're up to, but also really see that bigger picture and see that kind of strategic perspective on their work.
So it would mean that you have to have a perspective of what things you have to do, the progression, timelines, and having a structure and see how you're going to prioritize your tasks. So prioritization would be very important.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, often, again, if you've got a whole bunch of things on a to-do list and a whole bunch of things in email and a whole bunch of things in your head, it's really difficult to marry those things up in one go and say, right, what really matters? What's the biggest priority? Whereas if you can chuck all that stuff from the email in your head and everywhere else into the same place as your to-do list and look at it, not just in a to-do list kind of task sense, but also in a project kind of sense. I think a lot of people have a reasonable but not great to-do list, and a lot of people don't even have a project list. So having a project list alongside your to-do list, being able to look at that bigger picture as well as the small stuff, really just helps with prioritization. And one of the things that we are big fans of is the idea of the weekly review, which was, kind of first really mooted by David Allen in getting things done. And for me, that's a really key habit within Productivity Ninja, is not just a weekly review, but also a daily review as well. So having a kind of small, sort of piece of thinking that you do every morning, and then a bigger piece of thinking that you do about once a week. And it's really just a checklist. And if people are kind of interested in how that works and the real kind of nuts and bolts and practicalities of that, if you just Google Think Productive Weekly Checklist, then you'll find a PDF on there that we've put online, which just gives you kind of some examples of how a weekly checklist can work. So it's pretty simple, but it does involve getting away from the day-to-day, getting away from your desk for a little period of time, maybe an hour, 2 hours every week. And really what I say is that it's concentrating that strategic level thinking. It's not extra thinking, because you would have done that stuff anyway, but it's putting it all in one go and doing it much more systematically.
And how does it affect on people's life? How this way of thinking would affect this way of thinking at work would affect people outside work?
I think it's huge. I mean, I had somebody a few weeks ago write to me saying that their doctor had prescribed Productivity Ninja as a way to combat migraines.
That's very good.
And really, they were talking about a lot of stress in their work. And the doctor said, hey, you need to get that stress under control. And here's a book that I found really helpful. He was just a GP, but had read the book. And this lady wrote to me and said, hey, I read this book just on the back of my doctor's recommendation, and it's cleared up my migraines. That was one of the best emails I've ever had, because to me, that feels like it's not just about making that person's organization better and making that person's work better, but it's also about making their lives better. And it's a really strong illustration of that. But I get a lot of people who they implement this kind of stuff very systematically at work, but then, like I said before, that momentum becomes really addictive. So you get the work stuff sorted out, and then it's like, right, I want to sort my house out, and I want all that kind of I think Marie Kondo has really sort of tapped into that nerve in recent times on a very, very sort of domestic level. But I think for a long time I've had people who've done my stuff, and then they've sort of applied those same kind of principles to like their personal lives, and buying the right theatre tickets at the right time, or Wimbledon tickets, or whatever it is, and organisation at home and all that sort of stuff. So I think it really has a sort of holistic approach, and even just being able to close down the laptop on a Friday and know that you know exactly what you're doing on Monday, and you don't need to think about it in between, is such a powerful thing. And just the way that then affects your sleep over the weekend and your ability to engage with family and leisure and all the other things that you want to do, I think is huge. And for me, that's a big part of why I do what I do, is, I really love that sort of wider application of this stuff, and the kind of wider benefits beyond just doing stuff in the most efficient way possible, which is a big value of mine, is like efficiency and reducing waste and all of that. And that's like one part of it, but turning that more into a lifestyle where it feels like you just have this kind of momentum and positivity, that's really where, for me, the real soul of working around productivity is.
Okay, this is very interesting. And about your books, you have the How to Be a Productivity Ninja, or less, achieve more, and I believe it's and love what you do.
Love what you do. Yeah.
But, yeah, it's very very empowering title. And what other books your work, or any book that you're working at the moment?
Yeah, well, I'm working on another one at the moment, but the one I just released a few months ago is this one, Work Fuel, which is the Productivity Ninja's Guide to Nutrition. So very much up your alley, I think as well. And it has an interesting backstory to it, because I was finding I was using all of my own productivity tools. So all the stuff that's in Productivity Ninja is stuff that I very much practice what I preach. And yet I was finding that at like 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, particularly towards the end of the week, I was just getting really tired, and I was feeling like, even though I knew what I needed to do, I just didn't have the energy to do it.
Yeah.
And I also had a little period of full-on depression as well. So times where I just really couldn't get out of bed, and I was really struggling just mental health-wise. And I had met somebody called Colette Hennigan, who turned into my co-author on the book. And so we collaborated for a couple of years and did a couple of wellness days within big corporates as well. So she would focus on nutrition. That was her background. She's a qualified nutritionist. And then I would focus on productivity, and we'd be kind of both on the same kind of circuit in terms of some of those events. And then when I had this period of really low energy, I just reached out to Colette and I said, hey, I just really need your help. My first query to her is, she used to have a kind of practice where she would sell vitamins as part of it as well. And I was like, can I just get some of those vitamins? I was just determined to get the quick fix. And she said, well, actually, I don't think what you need is vitamins. I think what you need to do is really think about nutrition and focus on nutrition. So I started working with her as my coach. And our way of coaching was I would send her a photo of every single meal on WhatsApp. And then she would make comments on them. So she'd say, hey, that's great. Or she'd say, that's cool, but can you swap out this for that? And, just give me ways to upgrade the things I was eating. And it made me way more mindful of what I was eating. But it just really started to dawn on me the effect of that and, how much more energy I felt. And honestly, now I don't feel that sort of 3 p.m., 4 p.m. afternoon slump anymore. It's just gone. And a lot of it's just really, simple stuff. But just applying those key nutrition principles really well just seemed like a really big change that I'd made that had really had a huge effect on me. So we wrote this book, Work Fuel, and the idea is to bring practical nutrition advice to people in a way that is, aimed at people who are really busy. They're on trains and planes a lot. They're running around everywhere. They're having meetings that are over lunch hours and all that kind of stuff. How can you manage nutrition well when that's your life, when you're really busy? And we've had amazing feedback on it. It's, I think, last time I checked, it's got a clean 5 stars on its Amazon reviews as well, which is great. But actually, reading some of those reviews, you can really see that it, it's having a big impact on people out in the world. And I'm really proud of it. So yeah, Work Fuel is the new book and the one I'm still kind of chewing everybody's ear off as much as I possibly can about.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And for people with tight schedule, people traveling, it's understandable that it's very difficult to have a proper nutrition schedule. If you're in hotels, you're traveling all the time, it's very easy to eat something here and there, and at the end of the week, the nutrition can be just a mess.
Yeah,
and,
sure.
Yeah, and sometimes you have like basic nutritional knowledge, understand more or less how things work, or macronutrients, or things that you digest better, and it makes a great difference. And tell me something. You mostly focus on the corporate side. So you help companies, and it has been expanding on people's lives as well. And I believe you have other books that you have published in between this and.
Yeah, there's a couple of other ones. So there's one called Introducing Productivity, which is part of a series of introducing books that my publisher's done. There's one called Study Ninja as well, which is based on taking a lot of the key principles from psychology around how to retain information and how to study, and then kind of adding in some of the Productivity Ninja principles about how to organize information. So it's kind of really aimed at people at the kind of 14 plus education kind of range. And the idea is to really bring a lot of those very practical productivity skills into the discipline of study. So that's another one I'm really proud of. And again, I get these strange little emails from people around the world who tell me how they've got onto their university course by the power of Study Ninja and all this kind of stuff. So it's always really nice to sort of hear those bits of feedback in the world. And it's kind of like one of those things, because our main business, Think Productive, goes into corporates. We've done a bit of that in universities as well, where we've talked about the Study Ninja side of things, but it's never really been a kind of huge part of the business. So it kind of felt like this book that we wrote and we put it out there, and had a really nice response to it. But it's never been something that I've kind of really then taken forward. Whereas with Work Fuel, the idea is to go into companies and offer nutrition as sort of part of the range, if you like. So whereas Think Productive is there, offering all the workshops around productivity, we'll also have a whole offering around nutrition, and both one-to-one nutrition coaching sessions, as well as full-on workshops and keynotes and that kind of thing as well.
There's any other project you are working on? Anything that you would like to comment?
Yeah. So what else am I working on? So Yeah, I've just come back in September from a very long 6 weeks summer holiday. I'm a single dad, so having the experience of the first 6 week holiday we've had has been pretty tough going, pretty exhausting. But it's nice to be back at work for a rest right now, and just planning the travel schedule. So doing a lot of keynotes and talks with different companies and taking in lots of different locations in the UK and over to Rome next month and over to the States and various other places. So pretty busy autumn. Autumn always tends to be my busiest time for doing talks and client work and that kind of thing. And then the other thing that I'm working on is taking Work Fuel as a book and developing that more into a business. So going out into companies and doing the talks and workshops and all that sort of stuff as well. So that's kind of the big thing over the autumn. Colette Hennigan, who's the co-author of the book and the real nutrition brain behind it, is currently on maternity leave. So I'm kind of tinkering away in the background while she's away, and then when she gets back from maternity leave, we'll be at it a little bit more full throttle. So that's the plan over the autumn months for sure.
How is your experience in being a father, and how can you put everything together with your tight schedule?
Actually, I mean, here's the thing: with a lot of productivity ninja preparedness, right? So just to sort of give you an example, so I have a childminder who does a few school runs or days. Like if I'm out and I'm going to be getting the train back into Brighton too late, then she'll pick him up and she'll take him to my house and sort of wait for me to get home or whatever, and we coordinate that with his mum as well. And so it's with a lot of planning really, and I think the toolkit of Productivity Ninja really helps with that, particularly the weekly review stuff, and being able to as part of that review really look at your calendar and just go through, okay, so I'm going to be here then, what's the train time, who's got in there, what's happening there, and just all of those kind of bits, and I suppose the other part of it is, I mean, I took the decision at the start of the summer to really take the entire summer away from work, so the entire 6 weeks. And I'm in a really lucky position that I can do that because I've got a really great team at Think Productive who handle the kind of day-to-day sort of client liaison and that sort of part of the business. And, I can be on WhatsApp a little bit and sort of emails a little bit in the evening. But for the most part, I kind of stayed away from it over the summer. But also, again, knowing that I have the tools to be able to whip that back into shape pretty quickly and to make sure nothing's going to fall between the cracks. So, that's been just a really valuable tool set for that, really. I think having good structures when you are at work helps you to not be at work and to not feel too bad about that. And I think that we've all probably been on those holidays at one time or another where you spend half the holiday worried about the things that you should be doing at work. And I think, if I'm really on top of my Productivity Ninja game, I just don't think about work at all when I'm not there. It's more I'm here to spend time with him and to just really give him my full attention and to not be too caught up in the sort of minutiae of what might await me in September.
Let's go through some rapid fire questions.
Sure. I'm not very rapid fire, am I? So
that's okay.
This
is just it's called rapid fire, but I always ask how is it, what do you like, why, then we can extend a little bit. What is your favorite book?
Ooh, my favorite book. I'm slow to the game on this one, but I'm just reading Sapiens at the moment and really enjoying that. So that's kind of blowing my mind. I often say, and the other one I read recently, this is very geeky. I love baseball, and some of your audience may have seen the film Moneyball or come across the book Moneyball, which is all about how to kind of game the system at baseball. And there's a kind of updated book of that called The Shift. So it's all again about sort of baseball statistics, but looking at it more from a human psychology level as well as from the statistical level. So probably if you didn't like baseball, you'd still enjoy that book, but it's very much a baseball geeks book. So that's called The Shift. And I'll give you one more. Atul Gawande wrote a book called Being Mortal, which is basically, it sounds really morbid. It's a book basically all about death. He's a surgeon in Boston, and writes for the New York Times and stuff like that. Like beautiful writer, but wrote this book about his experiences of dealing with people who are terminally ill, people who know they're about to die, and really looking at a series of questions to ask those people about whether it's worth, extending treatment and carrying on or not. And essentially it becomes a book about the meaning of life because it's a book about death and dying. And it's just one of the most emotional, beautiful things I've ever read. So yeah, Being Mortal by Atul Gawande is one that really has stuck with me. You'll notice I read a lot of, it's all very much the sort of non-fiction stuff. I don't read a lot of fiction. I basically read fiction on the beach at least a week into my holiday, where I'm fully unwound. I let go of the non-fiction. I give the fiction stuff a go. So there you go.
That's great. And what's your favorite movie?
Favorite movie of all time is I think it's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I just think it's so beautifully acted and just a very powerful film. So yeah, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Why is it so powerful?
So for those people who don't know the story, so there's kind of some allegory towards kind of communism and bureaucracy and kind of systems in there, and it's a kind of maverick guy against the system. And I'm always a fan of underdogs against the system and breaking the rules and all that stuff. That's always a big thing for me. But I think what's really interesting is he comes into that as this kind of criminal guy who is pretending to be mad in order to get out of prison. And then what he doesn't realize is that whereas his prison sentence has an end and he would be out, once he's in the mental institution, he can be kept there for as long as they want. And so the system, it's the story about the system breaking him down. And then I won't spoil the ending, but the ending is a very powerful, it's just a very powerful thing. And that's as much as I'm going to say, because I don't want to ruin it if you've not seen it.
I agree. What's your favorite hobby?
Favorite hobby, I'd say two: music and baseball, and a bit of football actually. So I'm a big baseball fan. I'm actually just planning a trip to the States over the next couple of weeks to catch the end of the baseball season for a few days. I kind of go out there a couple of times a year and watch a bit of baseball. I'm a big Aston Villa fan, season ticket holder at Aston Villa, which is happier times now than it's been for a while. So we're enjoying that. And then music, just a huge sort of festival and gig goer, and I just love live music. I'm probably at a live music gig probably once a week, something like that. It's a very big passion for me.
Any nice, great or nice concert you have been to recently?
Recently, I just came back from We Out Here Festival, which is Giles Peterson's festival. So lots of the UK jazz, sort of very young, dynamic South London-based UK jazz scene happening at the moment with people like Ezra Collective and Kokoroko and Oscar Jerome and Nubaya Garcia. Just incredible music. So most of those guys were there over that weekend. So that was really cool. And I'm really looking forward to my favorite band in the world is called Hiatus Coyote. They're from Melbourne, Australia, and they're coming to London on a Monday night in November and then Amsterdam on the Tuesday night, and I'm going to both. I'm very excited. Those are my nights off being a dad, and it felt really well. I was like, yes.
Yes. And how about an inspirational person for you, and why?
That's interesting, because I'm quite cynical when it comes to who the inspirational people are, right? So you're supposed to say Richard Branson and all these people, and I just find flaw in Elon Musk, and I just find massive flaws in all of them. So I don't really have any of those kind of big heroes. I would say probably actually one that is along those kind of lines. I think Warren Buffett is a really fascinating thinker, and I just really like the way his brain analyzes things. I love the fact that he's like he's the kind of oldest, most radical feminist, because he just has this real sort of clear, matter-of-fact way of saying, well, I'm really bullish on the American economy. He says something like, I'm really bullish on the American economy because we've been really underutilizing half our resources for a long time. And so when we get women into leadership positions and stuff, we're just going to be flying. And I just think it's just really simple little observations like that that just make him a very interesting thinker, and probably Bill Gates along a similar line. But I'm someone I don't really go in for the whole sort of guru thing, and I'm much more values driven. And I think the values of lots of just friends and people I meet in my life and their sort of attitudes inspire me way more than all the people that you're told to be inspired by. I try not to be a guru as well, so I quite enjoy in my books talking about the times where I screw it up, because I don't want anyone ever to think I'm perfect at stuff, because I just think it's unachievable. And I think the whole industry around self-help and these kind of inspirational quotes on Instagram or whatever, I just find it all a bit tedious, to be honest. And try not to contribute to it too much. Yeah, I'm really rubbish on Instagram and Twitter and stuff, because I just don't do the things that everyone wants me to do and probably expects me to do, but I just don't feel I don't want to add to that noise.
How about a place that you'd like to visit?
Interesting. I'm really lucky that I've done a lot of travel, and often it's the places that I wasn't that interested in visiting that inspired me the most. Before I went to Australia, it wasn't, to be honest, particularly high on my list, and I'm absolutely in love with Australia. Every time I've been 3 times now, and just really love it there. The place I've not been to that I probably would really love to go to the most when I next do a big kind of travel-y trip would probably be Japan, and Tokyo in particular. I think is just feels like a really fascinating, interesting, mysterious kind of city that just the culture just feels like just so fascinating. So I think Japan is probably next on my list of big trips.
Great. And to finish, a meaningful life for me is?
A meaningful life for me is living in a way that is consistent with my values. I think for me, living your values and expressing your values and expressing that through your actions, not just your opinions, is really vital. My values, the sort of the key ones for me are kind of efficiency and kind of eliminating waste, which I deal with a lot, through my work. I'm big into kindness and compassion and empathy. I just think that's just a really underutilized sort of component of human relationships. I think a lot of the problems that we see in the world now, just to get heavy for a minute, are caused just by a kind of lack of human connection and kind of lack of empathy and lack of kindness. And I think those things are very underutilized but powerful forces in the world, let's put it that way. And then I think the last one for me is like freedom and autonomy. I'm a big believer in trying to create freedom for myself. And that's, I guess, why I'm an entrepreneur. I want to have that freedom to make my own decisions and be autonomous. And also to find people you trust and then give them freedom and autonomy in the work that they do. So my way of managing within Think Productive is to be as uncontrolling as possible and give people the freedom to be them rather than give people the freedom to be what I want them to be. And so I think for me, a meaningful life is like living those values and doing so in a way that makes other people happy as well as making me happy. And that's kind of what I like to do. And I'm not perfect at it, but I like to think I'm pretty consistent and always trying to be better.
Great. Graham, thank you very much for your time. Great to talk to you.
Thank you. Great questions. It's been a pleasure.